Alright, so I'm having a lot of fun with this whole Tremors thing, so let's go right into the third movie, which is Back to Perfection, which, to my understanding, is Michael Gross's favorite of the franchise, and that makes perfect sense since it seems now that Burt is completely taking over as the face of the series, as we talked about eventually would happen. And I love this introduction we get immediately, where typically we've talked about, exposition dumps and how much of a drag they can be and how it's the worst kind of dialogue, and it's like there's other ways to show that. But what I really love here is that the opening scene of this movie is just a big exposition dump, but it's also perfectly in line with Burt as a character at this point, with that sort of just the right amount of cockiness and that whole all-knowing thing, and how we're getting more of the terminology now with shriekers, which was a term I was missing in the last video, has now officially been introduced. And the way he talks about how all this is still going on because of a lack of action from authorities, and it's like, even in movies this outlandish and this campy, it's like, yeah, I can imagine that being the scenario where the reason that these things would still happen and these things would still be running around is authorities just not giving enough of a shit. It almost seems too accurate to what a real life situation of this might be. And I loved the way they also play on that, the idea of how this would actually potentially play out if this were, in the wild event, this would be a real scenario where everything, especially in Perfection, has become like a tourist attraction now, with this being like the first sighting and them doing like these, tours that give people the feel, that trick people into thinking they're having the real experience, and the gullibility of those people in general. I love the way they show the almost kind of small-mindedness of these tourists, with the one dude that wants a picture with the graboid, but he calls it the Tremor, which is, to my understanding, something that has happened with this franchise, where like you see the poster for the original movie, and despite people should being able to know what a tremor is, people mistakenly calling the graboids that. So the fact that you actually have characters in the movie now doing that is hilarious, and I love the sort of, even in like 2001, they were kind of going into that meta territory, and I love the stuff that we get about some of the other characters, where what's interesting about this one is, since we've come back now, we do have characters returning from the first movie, which is really nice to see, or family members from other characters. And I love that they just sort of slip in casually that there's a strong implication that Earl and Grady's theme park actually happened. And I love the fact that like Earl's involvement in this, especially where it seemed like sort of Grady's thing that sounded like a dumb idea at the time, is now apparently the successful thing, and so that explains where they are. And I can imagine Fred Ward being too busy or something. I'm not sure why the dude playing Grady wouldn't come back, but I don't know what the story on that is. But going into it, talking about some of the characters that come back, where we have Nancy, we have Miguel, we have Mindy. I didn't recognize Ariana Richards right away. Like, I for a minute, I had thought she had been recast, and then the more I looked at her, I was like, oh no, that's actually her. She was almost unrecognizable. And I love the, obviously it's a very, sort of like, it's basically the epilogue of the movie, but the way they brought back worthless ass Melvin in the most appropriate way possible, which is very satisfying. And then we have Jody, who's obviously in place of Walter now and has the shop and all that. So I love that there's like the feel of the original movie again, with all these, original cast members and the characters, and just the feel of it in general, but the way things have changed so much since then, also, where we've seen the escalation of how now everybody knows what they are, but not only that, we're getting more and different versions of them now as they continue to evolve. Obviously, I've been on about this thing about the practical effects versus CGI thing, and it is clear that we're starting to embrace the CGI more and more, even though I was kind of anticipating that anyway. Like, I knew it was inevitable we were going to get to that point. There's still, practical effects here every now and then, and there are cases where it's like, you can get them having to use the CGI for the ass blasters when they start flying and stuff like that, because that's the kind of thing where, on the budget that they had, we might have possibly been in Plan 9 territory if they tried to do that practically, where it may not have looked as good. It was just kind of a compromise you have to go with in this scenario, especially as they evolve and get more elaborate as they come. Um, but we still get some fun practical stuff here. I love the moment when Bert gets his Tommy Lee Jones moment where he's intentionally gets eaten and then has to come back out. But the thing here is, while there is the CGI, the whole how it's very practical when he has to be cut back out. But he still has that moment where he's able to put his sunglasses back on and give himself that moment of dignity in this very undignified moment. And the way we're just continuing to build on Bird as a character like this, because what I love about him is he could be such a one joke character with the way that he is and his whole like he's constantly prepared for this whole thing. He's got the whole arsenal and everything. But somehow Gross has found a way to really keep this character going and is still like endlessly entertaining anyway. Because there's especially his comedic timing is always so on point, particularly in the moment when like everything's blowing up around them and he's losing everything that he has in this moment, but he's just sort of like almost counting down to himself what's gonna go next. But at the same time, while that's funny, we also do get the sense like we feel his loss, even though it's still funny. Like the whole thing of him not having a gun being his whole issue, and how it's like a piece of him is missing because he doesn't have his gun. Like I said, it seems like it'd be such a one joke idea. But he's just really making this character work as it goes along, and I think that's gonna help this as much as it can going along. Like I said, I have heard that they don't stay this entertaining, but I don't. But once again, that's one of those things where I guess I'll find out for myself. I could be on a different page from people, but we'll see. The fact that I have embraced straight to video sequels as far as these go up to this point is kind of a miracle, because like I was saying, how I kind of get involved in that sort of stigmatism against them, where it's like you just imagine something lesser and cheaper, and it's oftentimes I won't even seek out straight to video sequels, but these are doing something. Like I like that I can see how this has managed to go on as long as it has, because it's one of those cases where when I had only seen the first movie and I had just heard that there were this many more, it was like, of all things, like why and how? Like what can they possibly do? Well, yeah, we're talking about them mutating. We're talking about the appearance of acid blasters now, and how Bert rightfully mentions that just sounds like a porn. But it's one of those cases where you hear that and it's just like you're just having so much fun with it. It's like, yeah, we're gonna they're called acid blasters. We're gonna run with this now. Where that would seem a bit too silly in another movie. It's like the tone that's been established up to this point. It's like, yeah, like anything they throw at us, it's like, we'll run with this. We'll see what they do with this. Especially since the idea of them flying, even though you've got, the shoddy CGI and everything going on is so ridiculous, there is still something pretty terrifying about the idea of these things flying. Especially that shot when Mindy and Nancy are on the roof, and they're just getting ready to learn that they exist, and you see the one in the distance get closer and closer as it flies towards them. That's in another movie that wasn't as campy, that would be a terrifying shot. And I mean, honestly, it still kind of is. So there's that, and we do up the stakes just a little bit. Obviously, if you have returning characters, one of your questions might be, are any of them expendable, or are we going to get too attached to them? And losing Miguel felt pretty, like, it happens pretty abruptly, but I like that it has like sort of the effect of it is still there. I mean, as far as like the revenge factor of it, when he's like the way Bert says that was for Miguel after they kill one seems very offhand, and it's like like even before that shot is over, before it even cuts anything else, they're already on to something else, and it's like, well, we've avenged Miguel. That's the end of that. But still, there is still something there between the characters that I'm really into. And then, of course, we eventually get our climax, where we have the Graboid come in. There's so much Moby Dick allegories going on here, and the one that would be his white whale following up to take out the ass blaster. It's so interesting. We're only 3 movies in, and I'm so comfortable with this terminology. Like that's how successful these movies are, with just throwing it whatever they can at you, and you just accepting it, because that's how entertaining they are. You just get caught up in it, and yeah, it has that very sort of. We've been talking about Jurassic Park comparisons here, and with Ariana Richards here even more so. And there is that, and it feels like the T-Rex ending, where we have the raptor, and then it's the T-Rex that comes in. It feels very much like there's a lot of homages going on to Jurassic Park through pretty much all of these, and that was a particularly good one. So, and yeah, I really love just how much they really have embraced like the camp and the comedy so gloriously, because this is something that I try not to like dwell on too much because I've done so many videos on it now, and I'm tired of talking about it. And surely, if people have watched enough of these, they're sick of hearing it. But I get the sense that if you wanted to compare this to another franchise, another sense that I get here is that like everybody is having fun with it, and what I mean by that specifically is the filmmakers and the writers are having fun with coming up with the stuff and then executing it and then just expanding on that. But there are cases where, like, I think of like Soderbergh's Ocean movies, or like 12 and 13 in particular, where you get the sense that the people that are making it are having a shitload of fun, but none of that is translating to the audience. And it's like, they look like they're having a great time. I really couldn't give a shit, but good for them, I guess. But that you can see the filmmakers having fun with this, and it's definitely coming through to the audience also, and it just feels like everybody is taking this in the best way. Because the franchise I was talking about that you could start to compare this to when you talk about embracing the camp. Um, Obviously, I've made it known 5 different times, or however many of those there were, that I can't stand any of the Sharknado movies, and I have so much contempt for their existence, period, because it's one of those things where it's clear from the get-go they weren't trying to make something good. They were trying to embrace that so bad it's good thing and make that immediately, not having no understanding whatsoever of how cult movies work and how the fact that they happen by accident. Like you can't make a so bad it's good movie happen. It just has to happen gradually after you've made something with actual passion. And you would think these would be in that territory because it feels like they have a similar ridiculous factor, but no, there's some weird sincerity in the Tremors movies up to this point that I've felt. And I don't know if it's between the characters or if it's Gross's commitment, or if it's the writers or what it is, but there's just something in here that I really love that's sort of capturing that vibe that I feel like movies like Sharknado try to out of the gate. But the Tremors movies seem to have just kind of fallen into it. Because while the first one certainly had, like, the feel of a B monster movie from, like, the 50s or something, just in the 90s, and you could sense there was, like, some homage going on there. It didn't feel like it was just it was trying to be its own thing, too. Which is something I don't think the Sharknado movies ever accomplished. It was just them constantly trying to get the audience to love them. They were like desperate puppies at the doorstep, just scratching, begging to be loved. It was pathetic from the get-go, and it got even more pathetic as those movies kept coming out. And like I said, in this, you look at Tremors 3, and you introduce something called Ass Blasters. And I'm just like, alright, it's so integrated in itself. It's just like, that's about right. That's about where we are in this franchise. Let's go. We have ass blasters now, and that's what they're called, and I'm perfectly okay with that. And I don't even feel stupid saying that because, as they explain in the movie, that's exactly what they do. Like, that perfectly explains what they are. and you just go with that, and the silliness just kind of comes along with it. You don't have to force it. Like those Sharknado movies do, and so I just really appreciate that. Like, I love this. Like, it's almost like another thing that comes to mind when you think about naming the ass blasters. That is, it reminds me. Watching these movies in general reminds me of like when you would play with toys as a kid, and you would just come up with your own names for things. That's what it feels like watching these movies. Is that kind of feeling, where it's like you're just watching people play with toys, but it's incredibly entertaining, and you feel like you're a part of the game, and I can really appreciate that. So, yeah, I think that pretty much sums up 3. So, I'm really glad I started to pursue these. I'm interested to see where 4 goes, and like I said, I'm not sure where the series lies as far as like continuity, and if you have to have like if there's certain canon where things will make sense later if you see the series first, because I think it was right around here is where the series happened after this. Yeah, after this or after 4, I can't remember, but my plan is to just do the series at the end after I've done all the movies, as in just in one video. So we'll see how that goes, and if anything has to be put together, then I'll hopefully figure that out. So yeah, so we'll continue on with the Tremors franchise, and we'll keep doing all the other stuff we've been doing, like the new release reviews and horror verses, and trilogies and franchises and all that stuff throughout October, and then we'll see what happens from there. So until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.